Hey, everybody. Welcome to a new episode and a new mini series for the GCNC Worldview podcast. We've got a great program coming up, 8 episodes of Cannabis by the Numbers, where we're really digging into not only things like general market trends and why we care about all that, but really getting into the details of the numbers behind cannabis businesses. What's real? What's illusion? How are people using data to make decisions and sometimes not make decisions that they should have made? If you followed the cannabis industry at all over the last 15 years, you've seen some spectacular numbers, followed by spectacular failures. And we've also seen some really good decisions being made by companies that are strong and healthy, and oftentimes people don't even hear about them because they're strong and healthy and doing the jobs that we all expect them to do. So today I have two of the world's truly best experts when it comes to understanding the cannabis industry and the numbers behind them. I have Rachel Wright, who is the CEO of Verdant Strategies, and Beau Whitney, who is the CEO and founder and lead analyst, and every other title you can have from Whitney Economics. Beau Whitney with us. Rachel and Beau, I am really excited that we're pulling this together. We've talked about it for quite some time. And honestly, every time I've had you guys on stage in different parts of the world or had a chance to watch you on stage in different parts of the world, I thought I really need to bring this series together and let these two individuals really dig in to the topic. So, Rachel, why don't we start with you? We're going to spend a little bit of time doing some introductions around everybody and your companies to make sure the audience is well versed. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and Verdant?
For sure. So my name's Rachel Wright. I'm the CEO and founder of Verdant Strategies, as Chris mentioned. First, I just want to say thank you to GCNC. I want to say thank you to Chris. Thank you to Jill. You guys are amazing and a great organization. And we'd love to see more and more membership. And you're doing a lot of great things. And I know we have a lot coming up. So very exciting. So Verdant Strategies, yeah, definitely. We've been in the industry for over a decade. We're born and bred in the California market. So we have withstood a lot of the tests of time in the California market. And we've expanded throughout the US and now supporting some of our clients overseas, basically with accounting, income tax, state and local tax compliance. And myself, I help my business owners with a lot of consulting work, mergers and acquisitions, just general decision making. Sometimes people just need something to bounce ideas off of, and that's what we're here for.
It's great. Thank you so much, Rachel. And Beau, I think most people who have tracked any kind of data analysis in cannabis over the last 10 years have probably seen you either quoted or read one of your reports. But, tell us a little bit about Whitney Economics and what you guys are up to.
Yeah, thanks again for this opportunity. I want to echo Rachel's comments about GCNC. It's pulling together a global community, truly a global community, and it's been fascinating to see how it evolved over time. And the people, each and every one, are just powerhouses. It's really amazing. So hats off to you guys on what you've been able to build.
Thank you.
I'm Beau Whitney, the chief economist at Whitney Economics. We've been in the cannabis industry also over a decade, 11 years. We realized at its inception that there wasn't a whole lot of data out there. The data was, a lot of spreadsheet pushing on Excel spreadsheets and duct tape and chicken wire and putting everything together. And so we realized that a lot of the decisions that were being made from an operator perspective, from an investment perspective, from a policy perspective, were basically done in a vacuum without data and based a lot on emotion. And so we wanted to take a lot of that emotion out and provide really disciplined and well-vetted data to the industry. We don't take a position on legalization. We don't opine necessarily on pending legislation. It's very rare for us to do so. But what we try to do is we try to provide unbiased data for global consumption. We're a data and insights provider. We also provide consulting services. Initially, we're viewed as more kind of a regional group, and then we're national, and now we're international. I think we were quoted in 39 countries just this year alone in the media. And so we've been able to attain a reach and still try to maintain being the provider of the best quality data in the industry.
Yep. And I think while there's always going to be debate, and there should be around numbers, I think the diligence that you put behind them and always having methodology behind how you got there is what makes it particularly strong. Because there's certainly plenty of folks who sort of look at something and go, hey, I wish it was this. And then they say it's a number and try to make it real. So a lot of respect, Beau, for the way in which you guys build your reports. And Rachel, same in how you have grown Verdant and the way in which you work with your clients. Today's topic, I kind of love the title, is Dirty Data, Bad Decisions, Why Clean Inputs Matter. And I really felt like I should be making myself a martini and making it dirty before we jumped in, but I felt like that might not be professional. So I didn't, but maybe next time.
Why not?
Yeah, right. I want to, first talk, Rachel, get your perspective on what is clean data to you. Like being a business operator myself and coming at it from the marketing world, I love the creative aspects of what we do. I love being able to build content and all that. And I will admit, one of my least favorite pieces is tracking all of the numbers and keeping them healthy. And so I have to hire people to do that, lest I completely go off the rails. And I think that often is the case with a lot of people that run businesses. But tell me, sort of from your aspect, when you're first working with someone or looking at a project, what is it that you're looking for to define clean and actionable data that people can actually use?
Well, first I'll start with 9 out of 10 companies that come to our firm don't have great data. So it's really like 1 out of 10 that has decent data. And so you can imagine, how do you draw any meaningful conclusions from that? And how do you make any decisions with that? So clean data, I would even go a step backwards, which is how do you get clean data when you have to first select a system, right? Which systems are you going to be using? How many systems are you going to use? And then so you have to kind of start with the architecture of how you're going to get the data first, right? But clean data it's really looking at your basic financial statements, right? That's what I look at. I first pull up the P&Ls. I look at it on a monthly basis. You do trend, you see if there's any variances, you look at the balance sheet. I'm not going to get too super technical, but when you see things jumping out at you like negatives on the balance sheet where it doesn't belong, cash accounts not being reconciled that should be reconciled. There's a whole list of things that indicate that the books haven't been tied out. And so, a lot of people just look at your P&L and your income statement to see, are your books accurate? But if you're not looking at the balance sheet, it's actually the balance sheet, which is your assets, liabilities, and equity, that determine whether you actually have a set of books or not.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I would argue also, Bo, that while at the business level, we have people making decisions on what they think might be good data, but at the macro level, when they were addressing the whole market and what the opportunity is and everything else, they haven't even constructed the business frequently on trustworthy data, because what they were looking at the macro level, that original pitch deck, whatever that is dirty as hell also. So like when you're building macro level reports, looking at market opportunities and all of that, how are you addressing, really from a competitive nature, what you do, which is really trying to get good, clean things that people can make decisions off of, versus all of this other clutter out there in the market? How do we build it in the first place?
Well, one thing that I've noticed is that data right now is self-reported. And so there's an inherent bias already in it. But what we try to do is we try to use the tools of record, the tools, the reporting systems at the regulatory level. You know, given their weaknesses, there's also a strength in using the official state tools. But what we also try to do is we try to triangulate. And so in a lot of our data models, we'll look at the data from different angles and from different sources, and we see if there's any commonalities and see if there's any differences. And then what we do is we look at those differences to try to understand them. And it's seeing the differences in the data that tend to tease out a lot of the insights about the market, because start asking questions. Why is that off? Or what does this mean? Or what happened there? And so we're always trying to look to triangulate. We're always trying to use data that is the official data, and then we always try to make sure that we choose the best model that fits the current circumstances.
So I always get nervous when I talk to people and they say, I want the best model, or how do you define best? Like when you're looking at these, how do we define what the best is versus something that's not as good? Because frankly, I don't think most people can tell the difference.
Well, I've been living in the data for over a decade now. And so you can really see if there's something that's standing out that just doesn't make sense. And so it's one thing to just blindly accept data, but then it's another thing to look at things with a critical eye. And in doing so, you can catch a lot of the issues associated with it. So good data, um, what's the best model? Typically, what we do is we try to take a very conservative approach, because the numbers are going to be big. It's a big market, and you don't need to be a cheerleader and inflate numbers and put the best model forward, because even if you take a conservative approach, it's going to be impressive. And so what we try to do is we try to take a conservative approach. And then if there's upside, then that's great. But I'd much rather have a positive surprise than a negative one.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about things like total addressable market and what that really means, and whether or not it's particularly useful, versus addressing like what your business is actually focused on in a coming episode. So as people listen, make sure you stay tuned as we move forward, because there's going to be a lot of detail around some of these topics. Discrepancies in data, whether macro level or day-to-day business operations, I think a lot of people find very scary. I know as a business operator myself, if I'm looking at something in my books or in my projections and it doesn't make sense, or I'm confused by it, oftentimes the reaction is I just want to put my head in the sand, right? But can't do that. So Rachel, when you're coaching and working with folks on how to clean up their data, how to really analyze it, how do you work with people to get them to get past that? Because it is also
Mhm.
an opportunity, I would think, for improving the business. But vast majority of the time, you really don't even know what to do with it. So
Mhm.
how do we address that and make it useful?
Well, I think also like looking at business owners from they're either in a reactive standpoint, they're always reacting to things. And in the cannabis industry, seems like we're always reactive because we have so many arrows coming at us as business owners, and especially operators have so many arrows coming at them at all times. So they're always put in this kind of defensive position, right? And so if I can, it's almost like a psychology. Can we get them out of reactionary mode, and can we get them into a proactive mode? And so if we can get them into proactive mode, then they're willing to put the work in to get the data right in order for us to make meaningful decisions for the business. Otherwise, we're just always going to be reactive. So I like the forward thinking business owners that I work with. Those are the ones that are kind of more growth mindset oriented. And because they're willing to look at the data and say, okay, what do I need to do to get this correct?
You
And they're willing
know,
to put the money behind it.
one thing that I look at are the outliers.
Mm-hmm.
And I, I my background was in supply chain in the semiconductor industry.
Mm-hmm.
And so we always, and it was with Intel, it was with Triquint Semiconductor. So there was always an indicator, about what is going on with your business. And there was a series of them. And when you set those up and monitored them, if there was one that just suddenly jumped that was out of whack, then that's the area that you could focus in on. And so what I've done with my clients in the cannabis industry is I've shown them what the averages are for the industry and then how they compare individually to the rest of the industry. And sometimes they're doing better, and that's something that can be celebrated. It's something that you can raise money on. And if they're performing below that average, then that's something that they can focus in on. So a lot of those averages, even though they're top line, they can be used to help manage and adjust the business accordingly.
Right. Yeah, like a good KPI dashboard. And it's very simple. It doesn't have to be very complicated. I think what happens is when people hear like KPIs, they either go from 0 to 100, really in rapid succession there. And I say, okay, let's just start with the basics. Let's keep it very high level. And you know, looking at very simple KPIs, dashboards, like Beau was saying. But it also does need to be specific for your market, at least for your state, because the KPIs in one of the newer markets or maturing is going to be very, very different than one in a mature market.
Yeah, and I actually want to dig into, KPIs, forward thinking economic models and what people can use because I have seen a lot of operators who, in a moment of panic, instead of like focusing on the core problem, just decide they're going to build a really big spreadsheet that then has a million little decision points that drive everybody that works for them crazy because now they don't know where to focus at all. But they sure do have 30 KPIs that they're supposed to hit now when yesterday they didn't have any. And so how how do we manage that from a just how do we get that mindset in operators to say, look, here are the 3 or 4 fundamental things that you need to focus on to really get a solid baseline? Because there are so many digital tools out there now, project management things, and it's
Mhm.
death by 1,000 apps. So how do we get it to a point where we can advise and say, look, these critical numbers are areas that you can really start with and then build from there?
I mean, I guess I'd say cash is number one, right? Cash flow is number one. Who's going to invest with, in one of your businesses or take you seriously if you're not cash flowing when you should be, unless you're pre-revenue. So I think everything starts with cash flow. And then you can make some projections for growth if you have some growth plans, but really cash flow. And then I start with your net income as a percentage of revenue. And then I work my way backwards from there. And then we set all the realistic KPIs based on the market, So that's actually where I start. And sometimes we look at the goals of the business. So say if they're at 5% EBITDA or 10% EBITDA, and we want to try to get them up to 15, well, then we make a plan. How do we get them up that next 5%? And it's not always cost cutting. So people think it's, oh, we're just going to cut employees or we're going to cut here, but those actually might not be good decisions. So I usually look at, gross top line revenue and gross profit. And that to me is one of the first numbers that I hit rather than trying to cut,
Yeah.
One thing that I look at is, I used to help run this vertically integrated company that was in medical and then adult use, and then we took them public. And one of the things I looked at is how are we performing against our goals? Are we performing to our forecast, and why aren't we trending towards our forecast, for example? And you can ask some questions like that. Another thing, when I was in the operations, we were doing just a tremendous amount of oil production, and I was looking at yields. And so, with a lower yield, or if there was a spike in yield, then all of a sudden our supply would be impacted. And then if our supply was impacted, we would know about that in advance. So we would tell the sales team and we'd say, hey, in 3 weeks, you're going to have, 200 fewer cartridges to sell. And so go out there now and talk to your customers and let them know. And that's kind of what the proactive versus reactive is, seeing it in real time and then projecting forward and then saying, hey, what are we going to do about this? We kept so many customers because we gave them advance warning rather than just show up and say, hey, we don't have any cartridges or we don't have any oil for you. And then also, shelf space is premium, especially if you're a supplier in this space. And if you didn't perform and you surprise the customer, then it would be very easy to kick you off the shelf. And so that would be devastating because it costs so much to get back onto the shelf. So just by saying, hey, look, we're looking out for you. There's going to be a little supply hiccup. It's going to last 3 days based upon our projection. And here's what we're doing about it. That was golden. So it's looking at the data, looking at how you're performing to your goals, and then communicating. That's really the key in all of this.
A little bit more because, Beau, that communication feedback loop is where it's at. And so if you have, say, a cultivator that's not talking to your sales staff isn't talking to the customer, and that feedback loop isn't going, whole 360, then you're going to have supply chain issues. You're going to have customer expectation issues that are not met. And then that ultimately impacts the brand. So that's actually one of the things that I talk to my clients about too, is like, where is your feedback loop? Okay, did your sales staff know that this strain was going to be low? They're going out there selling something that you don't even have. And so, that is definitely key.
Yeah. And I'm also going to jump in on the marketing side, because as you guys talk about feedback loop and KPIs, and I've seen this on our side of the fence as well with businesses where because they're not creating that communication loop, and because they're not tracking appropriately the results of where their marketing spend is, this is another area where sometimes cutting it is not super wise, but you won't know because you haven't tracked the results or how that all goes through, right? So you may be plowing a bunch of marketing into the space to create more demand. Meanwhile, Beau is working on the supply piece, and you're about to have a shortage, and you put those two things together and it's a train wreck, because you're short for a week while you've just been promoting a special that's supposed to happen, and everything comes off. So I couldn't agree more with what you guys are saying when it comes to communication and flow and really understanding the numbers. And that's part of why I'm particularly excited about this series overall, because we can look at this at the business level. We can also look at this at the very high level of how people are presenting numbers and trends overall. I think back to sort of the early days where we were hearing all of these hype masters talking up, what the results of these companies were supposed to be when they actually had no product to sell. They hadn't built the facilities yet. They didn't have a product to sell. It was really convenient for them because they were pre-revenue and could make all kinds of promises with very little accountability until everything comes home to roost, and then you're stuck. And so we're trying to encourage people to take all of these kinds of elements and pieces of advice and use them to build responsible, sustainable, and profitable businesses, which is something we've said at the GCNC since we started it 5 years ago, is please focus on those kinds of elements. But when there's some super like failures of people to where they've ignored data as the markets have emerged, but I want to focus on some positives. Like, where have you seen some real success stories, or where are you seeing people doing this particularly well and helping to guide them forward or mitigate problems? Rachel, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that there's some companies that I work with that are actually paying attention to the more operational metrics that Beau was talking about, so they're able to target some of those early on. So, I work with a group, and we, that has multiple cultivations, and we looked at, how many pounds they're getting per light, and just all these different operational metrics, and they actually knew their numbers. I was really, really impressed. And they knew all of the really important numbers, that they knew where the issues were. They also knew that they needed to fix them, and they were working on addressing them and fixing them. So I think, that's, operational metrics, not just financial metrics, are really important. So folks that are paying attention to those, and like Beau said also as well, is setting goals for yourself, and targeting those goals, measuring your performance against those goals. I've seen that happen in some companies.
Yeah, there's been pragmatic decision makers coming in, which certainly at the earlier stages of the industry were not particularly sexy. It was hard to find a job if you were a pragmatic decision maker. But I think as we've come along further, they're in great demand now. So, Beau, how about you?
Yeah, one thing that I found is, and this goes back to my program management and project management skills. I was part of a supply chain. I was supply chain expert in my previous life, right? And one thing that separated the success from failure was the fact that within an organization, they worked off of one set of numbers. A lot of times you'll have a sales team have a sales forecast, and then you'll have a financial forecast, and then you have an operational forecast. And if they're not aligned, then that sets the organization up for failure. It takes just a little bit more communication, but the more that you align on a single common data set, it sounds so simple, but it can be extremely effective. And it's and another thing that was a determinant of success was it was okay to to admit, hey, we were wrong on this forecast, and to adjust and be nimble. And so by adjusting and being nimble and not just locking in and saying we must hit $1 million a month in revenue or something, when your organization has no ability to hit that number, adjusting that number and being nimble is a big determinant of success. And it's also important to be able to communicate that, to say, hey, look, we kind of screwed this one up, but we're getting better, and to admit and kind of celebrate the mistakes rather than try to hide them. Those that celebrate the mistakes learn a lot from them, and then they can take corrective action and improve their organizational operations and their skills, and just run a healthier organization.
Yeah, I think setting aside ego and being able to look at data and make decisions based on it, and then mixing in the human element of experience and expertise is important, but oftentimes ego gets in the way, I think, with a lot of folks, and sort of breaks that down, saying, no, I'm wrong. It's like the person who thinks every poker hand they get is going to be, four of a kind. It just doesn't work that way,
Some of the successes that I've had have been when people have come after my numbers and they've said, hey, we think your numbers are BS. And I'm like, well, tell me where. And then we get into a discussion, because I'm not thinking that I'm perfect. I'm nowhere close to being perfect. We just put out really good data, and we're constantly trying to improve. And so being willing to accept feedback from others and then taking corrective action, and celebrating the differences and absorbing that, that's been a determinant in my success, because our data has gotten better and better and better. Now, I think it's important to state that just having your own personal good data, who cares, right? Other than you. But I think it's really important that if my data is good and we're constantly trying to improve it, and Rachel's data is good and she's constantly trying to improve it, then overall as an industry, we're improving as well. And so doing the little things as an individual company can go a long way to helping support the success and growth of the entire industry.
Yeah. And I would argue that goes all the way up to governments, right? If governments can take a breath and report good data and try to be consistent, it'll help us all out a whole lot. So, Rachel, did you have something to chime in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I show folks data and show them their books. We look at them together. We do some management reporting together. And I try to keep a very, very open mind, because there's things that people know about their business that I might not know, right? And so oftentimes I actually find smaller owners, even some mid-sized owners, know their businesses very, very well. And so they can also tell when something is off, or maybe there's some details that I've missed, or some way that their team has recorded something that has been missed. But I was always taught that as soon as a pro forma, a budget, or a forecast goes on paper, it's wrong, because we can't tell the future, right?
Yeah.
And so I had a CFO tell me that many, many years ago. And ever since I heard that, and he was a very smart guy, and I looked up to him a lot. So when he said that, it takes a lot of pressure off of us. And I think also, to also echo what Beau was saying, with projections, we have to be nimble in this market. We have to be ready to make decisions that weren't necessarily in our pro formas or where we thought the market was going to go. We need to be able to react in some ways if the market changes, especially in light of regulations in the local or the national area markets. So I think we need to also just think about being nimble is really, really important, and responding, because if we set this massive budget pro forma and we're sticking to it no matter what, that means we're not nimble. Nimble folks win. Nimble businesses win.
Yep.
I think
Couldn't agree more.
to add
and
to
go
that
ahead.
just a little bit is in terms of nimbleness and the like, I've found that
Mhm.
the successful ones stay true to their vision and stay true to their core. A lot of times, organizations have tried to be too much, either too much
Mhm.
too soon, or try to take on and become experts in everything. And then that was more of a recipe for disaster rather than a recipe for success. And so by not getting too far out over the skis and saying, hey, we're going to just stay true to our path and make adjustments, that's where they can be nimble but very successful. You don't have to be a huge multinational corporation, a multi-state operator to be quite successful in this space. You can be a small, very focused entity that stays true to their vision, and they tend to be the ones that are more successful than the larger ones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do want to say something on that. Sorry. So what I've
Go for it.
seen just to that effect is, like, say in New Jersey, I'm hearing a lot of micro licenses coming out, and these are small micro licenses. So this is usually 2 or more, about 3 different types of license types that folks have. So I see this could be a prescription for disaster, because you have a small business and they're trying to be not only a cultivator but a manufacturer and a retailer, and they don't even know which order they're going to start with. And I say, well, where are your core competencies, and then double down on that and build on that. You don't necessarily have to use all 3 licenses right now. So if people feel pressure to do all 3 and they're not good at all 3, well, that's not beneficial to anybody. So pick a core competency that you're good at, start there, especially if you're small. And I'm talking about like maybe 10 million and under, businesses, revenue businesses. We have to use our capital wisely. And so once
Yeah.
you have proof of concept and things work in that one part of the vertical, then maybe build on another part of the vertical.
Absolutely. And I'm going to use that part of this discussion that you guys just had as the teaser for next week, because we're going to wrap up this foundational episode. And really what you guys have just addressed is the beginning of the next episode's discussion, because we're talking about things like total addressable market. What is the big opportunity? And oftentimes in the cannabis industry, the hype and the pressure to be all things to all people is a business killer. And
Mhm.
these big, huge numbers are interesting and fun at times to look at, but really understanding how to take those and make them relevant to where you're at and what you're doing it with, whether it's a medical market in Europe or a cultivation in Colombia or a brand in the United States. This is something that we've seen over and over and over again, which is somebody throws out a big number with a B in front of it, and they say, we're going to do all of that. And very quickly, the data gets really dirty, the business gets very confused and unfocused. And so we're going to dig into that some more and figure out how to avoid it in the next episode with this series on cannabis by the numbers. Rachel and Beau, thank you so much for kicking
Thank
this off.
you.
I'm excited to carry this forward over the next 8 weeks. And until next time, everybody, hit subscribe, keep checking back for it, and thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.